Could Daenerys Targaryen ever be brought back to life in Game of Thrones? It's an idea that's existed ever since Jon Snow plunged his dagger into her in Game of Thrones ending, in one of the most controversial series finales in TV history. However, the theory isn't purely driven by a backlash to those events and a hope to undo them, but by the events themselves and the show's mechanics. Drogon took Daenerys' body to Volantis, and so, the theory goes, it's plausible she was taken to Kinvara, the Red Priestess who had supported Dany previously. There, like Jon Snow before her, she could perhaps be resurrected. That's the how. But what about the why? That's harder to answer, especially when thinking about a hypothetical Game of Thrones Season 9, which, in a world of remakes, reboots, and revivals, isn't an impossible idea. Ultimately, though it can't be fully ruled out, Daenerys' return would be a mistake for several reasons. 5. Resurrecting Daenerys wouldn't fix anything with Game of Thrones Season 8. Her actions cannot just be retconned away. Although it's tempting to think that resurrecting Daenerys would fix the perceived ills of Game of Thrones Season 8, that's not really the case. At a push, I can maybe see how she could have a self-reckoning with and reflection upon her actions, but I don't see to what end, really. While I mostly like Daenerys' villain turn anyway, the problems come with the build-up to it, that it was rushed, that there wasn't enough setup, that it needed more time. Trying to address it after the fact doesn't solve the issues leading up to it, unless it were to retcon things. King's Landing would still be destroyed, all those people still killed. There's no putting the fire back in the dragon, and those events cannot be whitewashed away, nor can she be absolved of them. Do you bring her back just to punish her? What's the point? 4. Daenerys' death in Game of Thrones did have meaning. The execution could have been better, but the intent was right. While I'll again admit that Daenerys' death certainly wasn't perfect, nor were the events leading up to it, they did have meaning and weight. Daenerys being corrupted by power and destiny is a compelling idea. Likewise, so is her being rejected by the place she'd long thought of as home, losing those closest to her, and being fueled by grief and rage. Or her being killed by the person she loves, because of what she's become, in front of the very thing that twisted her, falling with it just within her reach. I thought she was going to die. I feel very taken care of as a character in that sense. It's a very beautiful and touching ending. Hopefully, what you'll see in that last moment as she's dying is, there's the vulnerability. There's the little girl you met in Season 1. See? She's right there. And now she's not there anymore. But I stand by Daenerys. I stand by her. I can't not. Emilia Clarke on Daenerys' Game of Thrones ending. Back in 2019, there's room for argument about the execution, but the narrative and thematic ideas underpinning it are strong ones with plenty of heft to them. They make sense for Dany's ending, and I'd rather keep those in place, imperfect as they may be. 3. A resurrected Daenerys has no good story to tell. Her story, like the Targaryen dynasty, is over. One of the big problems I have with bringing Daenerys back is, to what end? I understand how it can happen, sure, but why are the Red Priestesses resurrecting her? What purpose is there in her serving the Lord of Light now that the White Walkers have been defeated? Unless they're coming back too, in which case David Benioff and D.B. Weiss would be owed some apologies, because that's getting into truly terrible territory. Westeros has a new king, one who isn't from the line of succession and cannot have children, so the Break the Wheel mission statement has been achieved. Westeros has a new king, one who isn't from the line of succession and cannot have children, so the Break the Wheel mission statement has been achieved, in a sense. The only option, then, would be to bring Daenerys back to get revenge. But on whom? She can't take it out on the capital of Westeros more than she already has. And Jon Snow is back beyond the wall, with enough guilt, grief, and trauma to last the rest of his life. There's certainly a shock factor, and it would have people tuning in, but there's no storytelling value. 2. Game of Thrones has already had enough resurrections. After Beric and Jon, we don't need more. The reason that Daenerys being resurrected is a theory that's existed since 2019 is because resurrections played such a big part in Game of Thrones, and indeed A Song of Ice and Fire too. But that's just all the more reason to not do it, as there'll inevitably be a case of diminishing returns and lowered stakes. The resurrections of Beric Dondarrion serve a purpose of showing that it's possible, for building out the Lord of Light lore, and for showing how death changes people. In the book, Catelyn Stark returning as Lady Stoneheart really drives that latter point home. Jon Snow had to be resurrected, and even then, I'd say the show didn't handle it brilliantly because it happened so soon in Season 6, and he wasn't affected enough by it. If Game of Thrones Season 9 is happening, it needs to have stakes and restore the idea that anyone can die. Death and resurrection are supposed to make people less of themselves. But given Dany already became a villain who burned countless innocent people, there's not much use for that. And if Game of Thrones Season 9 is happening, it needs to have stakes and restore the idea that anyone can die, something that increasingly slips away the more you resurrect people. 1. There are better ways to bring back Daenerys without resurrecting her. Emilia Clarke could even still return. While I don't want Daenerys to be resurrected, I wouldn't be against seeing the character again in some way if Game of Thrones Season 9 were to happen. She's one of the most important parts of the show, after all, and her story and legacy can live on even with her remaining deceased. For example, if following Jon Snow beyond the wall, then I'd like to see it explore his trauma more and how he really feels about killing